Excuse me, I was muted. So we'll start with the first question from a fellow who asked a question yesterday. It was the first question yesterday. He had a number of different things he was doing during his sit. And he said that he first wanted to say that when he relayed that his teacher had said that everything is shikantaza, he said it may have been that he misconstrued the answer. He says that misunderstanding things is part of his lifestyle. I probably doubt that. But he wanted to ask about something that Henry said in response, and that is that in Sanbo Zen, shikantaza is a very advanced practice. So that gave me the sense that it is something you suggest not even attempting until one has developed in other ways. Would you please elaborate? Because I'm confused by seeing it teed up as the first thing to go in Soto Zen. For instance, in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, it mentions shikantaza.
Yeah, that's commonly the case. I mean, when I first went to, actually probably wasn't the first Soto Zen place I went to, but one of the places that I went early on in my life of Zen to was a Soto monastery. And, we were told how to sit, meaning the posture, and that was the end of it. And I at that time had done several years of other styles of meditation. And I said, well, what do we do now, kind of thing? And the answer was, well, no, that's it. You just sit. You have your body in the right posture, and that's it. So I think that, and this was a beginner's weekend. So I think that is, yes, quite true that often that is how we're introduced to sitting in a Soto Zen context. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure myself of the wisdom of that. It may suit some people fine. And what they say in Sambo Zen is that if somebody has very strong, deep faith, I'm not quite sure whether that means faith in the practice or faith in something else, possibly either. Then shikantaza may be a suitable practice to begin with. But, these days when there's so much sharing and sort of mingling between traditions, I mean, it's very hard in the modern West to really only be exposed to one kind of meditation. I mean, of course it can happen, of course it can, but there's a lot of shared wisdom around meditation going on. And I think it's fairly commonly agreed that it's much easier to start sitting in a way that yields some tangible help if you have anchors of some kind or another. And it may be single anchors or multiple anchors. And commonly in basic mindfulness, we might be taught to use the breath as an anchor, or we might also be taught to use various other kinds of body sensation as anchors, or the sense of hearing, and so on. But to be sort of really given nothing but the posture is I think, quite a steep hill to be planted on, is thrown in the deep end of the pool. And in Sambo Zen, there's this idea, I think another point here would probably be that how you construe shikantaza varies from tradition to tradition, lineage to lineage, school to school. And in Sambo Zen, it has come down as this very particular kind of so basically sort of selfless, highly attentive awareness, free of self. And that is something you may come to after years of koan training. But for sure, that's not the only way of construing shikantaza. However, I think in all ways it's presented, it usually means you don't have, um, an anchor. You don't have an identified thing to hang your attention on, nor do you have an intention. It's a if an intention arises for your sitting, you let it go. I personally think that isn't the easiest way to start. Valerie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's all what you're saying is very consonant with what I've also, received from this tradition. The lovely question, um, threw me back into, I spoke about this just a lot this morning. And this shikantaza, just sitting, I very much agree that it's construed differently um, in different traditions, but no one doing anything. So there's a correlate in the way Zen has been understood as just walking, just eating, just sitting, just getting dressed, just talking. And we've often heard our teachers call that, if you think it's that the heart of Zen is to this kind of, I'm only doing what I'm doing. So a very clear, mindful awareness that I am now doing this. That's actually called Buji Zen or willy-nilly Zen. It's sometimes translated. Uh, though what a helpful step, but there's still the I am doing. And the beauty of this shikantaza, what the invitation is, that I am sitting, that I just completely falls away and is just sitting. Sitting is sitting. Now, to do that, I remember Yamada Kon Roshi, this book, Authentic Gate, that is really a nice introduction, I think. I mean, I'm biased, of course. But he said, this is a worthy aspiration, beginning, middle, end of practice. But then followed that up with these two paragraphs. And I remember them being, it's like, whoa, like the 8,000 foot precipice, So I actually looked it up. And if you don't mind, I'll just, he wrote this, that according to Harada Roshi, the essential matter in just sitting is to just sit with the mind as taut as a bowstring at all times. He also advises us to sit just sitting, as if we were locked in mortal combat with a master swordsman. This is a different time, but Harada. If we let up our guard for even an instant, the opponent's sword will come down upon our heads and we will be hacked to pieces. That level. I remember somebody saying that they had come into the Zendo, and I think it was Yasutani was just sitting there. Somehow this person had needed to leave and come back, and he had beads of sweat, absolutely still, but that kind of clarity and I don't know what that energy, power in his sitting. There isn't even a split second available for random thoughts. To truly just sit is to sit with such concentration. In all other forms of Zen meditation, whether counting the breath, following the breath, or working on a koan, there is always some center that acts as the point of concentration. No such center exists in just sitting. The sitting itself is the practice. So, wow. I'm ready for the bell. I want to try it. But uh, I think that you can see in this how, um, on the one hand, how beautiful and bare to be invited. Okay, here's the posture. Now sit. It's so naked. And it also called to mind for me, Henry, when you described that, hearing Ryan Roshi teach, I've mentioned this before, teaching intro to Zen, these basics to a small group of college students, and getting down on the floor and lifting his robes and showing them, what he was doing with his legs. It was so generous, so um, you know they're unpretentious in every way. And at the end, someone said, well, posture, breathing, stilling the mind, which is most important? And I've said this before, I immediately listening to that thought, oh, stilling the mind. Because when you're learning to sit, it's a rare not to just be sort of swinging the branches with monkey mind, at least some of the time. You get pretty familiar with that activity, that animal. That's uh, and anyway, he said posture, and this is it struck me then strongly, and it's also one reason I've come to be so grateful when Henry, when you guide us, as I've not experienced that elsewhere in Sambo Zen, and it really helps slip into the depths, slip into the water of this sitting. It just creates a clearing um, that I now have learned to do more readily in my own sitting. Um, so that's a long answer to, but I really, really appreciate the question. And I think it's something we can all feel this wonderful curiosity about, what is it to just sit?
Yes, yes, beautiful, Valerie. Love listening to all that. I was going to just another tiny point on it would be that I find it's something that any of us probably may come to at times in our sitting. We might be counting the breath, and then all of a sudden there's this strange ease, space, almost like a gap where we're just held in this suspension of clarity.
Yeah.
And we don't quite know how we got there. I think that might be a taste of shikantaza that arises spontaneously. And I suspect the more we sit, the more that kind of thing may happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I was just reflecting on, does it have something to do with the retreat on samadhi, the last time we gathered? And can there be shikantaza without samadhi? I don't know. How do they relate? It's something to reflect on, maybe,
When you talked about coming to it, yes, and in breath counting, as you just let go of the counting, like letting go of the oars, and there you are, or that's just it.
Our next question. No, Valerie?
I was just going to say, and then if, there, whatever comes, if some distraction comes up, then it's very just so natural without even a moment's, there's no need to judge, or you just start counting. If you find that attention has started to wander, it's so natural to slip in and out of that. Thanks.
Our next question. Is the awareness that Henry was talking about yesterday the same as the deathless?
Oh man. Yeah, so just in case anybody wasn't here yesterday, we were getting this little bit of a taste of this awareness that some contemporary non-dual teachers like to guide people to. Very, very nice experience that's relatively available for, I think, for a great majority of us, with careful guidance, where we can sort of get a sense that there's an awareness always present. It's been present since we were 2 years old, 7 years old, 14 years old, whatever. And we could go back to any moment in life and sort of recollect it vividly. In fact, one exercise is indeed to go back to some very fulfilled time in your life. I mean, just remembering being in the woods or by the sea, or some time and place where you just felt unusually alive and fulfilled and happy and complete and creative and energized, that sort of thing. And you just close your eyes and be there and remember what it was like to feel all that. And then notice that there's an awareness in that moment. There's an awareness of all that. That awareness is sort of steeped in qualities of positive qualities of fulfillment, joy, energy, aliveness. And then you can let the scene, as you've conjured it in your mind, dissolve, but stay with the awareness and notice that it still has very positive qualities. And then actually that very same awareness can be right here, right now, with love, with energy, aliveness, a kind of kindness intrinsic to it. Anyway, in other words, there are exercises for coming to taste an awareness that that in some ways, when we get to know it, it clearly, isn't different from one time to another in our lives. And some teacher would say, and that's who you are, is that awareness. The rest is just changing content, but who you really are is that awareness. So then there's this question. And so I was actually just saying yesterday, for those who weren't here, somebody had asked a question, is that what you find in Kensho? And I was saying, well, it's a very good question, actually. But if that were the case, then Kensho would be basically a rather inefficient and unreliable way of coming to taste that. And I don't think it is my answer. I mean, maybe there are overlaps or something, but Kensho is an experience with tremendous power, and it's rare. Nobody has a lot of Kenshos. If you have a dozen in a lifetime, that's an awful lot. If you have real Kenshos, they come out of nowhere. They're a kind of knockout blow. For some period of time, you're floored, and you're cast into a total overturning of the way you've experienced reality. That's not true of this kind of flavor of awareness. I mean, perhaps it can get to that in time, I don't know, but certainly these kind of glimpses of it aren't overturnings of your whole construal of reality. They're finding a deeper level, perhaps we might say, of consciousness, of awareness, that is quite available, actually, with the right guidance. And then we can get more adept at tuning into it ourselves. So is that the deathless? Whoa, well, who? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think the term the deathless is it's a little bit of a risky term. I know it comes up in the sutras, but the thing about it is there is this tension throughout certainly Mahayana Buddhism and probably all Buddhist history between setting up a sort of special something, whether you call it Buddha nature or Dharma, Buddha Dharma, or, once you give it a name like the deathless, it's suggesting that there is a thingness about it, some way it can get reified or objectified, and it can become a kind of other that we're in search of. But I think if you get right down to it with Buddha, with Shakyamuni Siddhartha's own teachings in the Pali Canon, and it always seems to be more about stripping away. When you come to, like that image of pulling away the fronds of a plantain tree to try to get at the trunk, and you find that, well, the trunk was nothing but the fronds. You pull them away layer by layer, piece by piece, and there's simply no trunk left. There isn't a thing in there. And this was one of his metaphors for or similes for sort of explaining shunyata, or emptiness. And that all manner of phenomena are like that. You keep pulling away and there's nothing there. So, I mean, perhaps, it's more what Valerie was talking about this morning. This, I mean, I'm going to fumble and stumble to try to capture how eloquently and beautifully and vividly she expressed it. But basically, things fallen away, things all fallen away. Is that the anything? But I mean, it would have to be deathless, because there's nothing there that was ever born. But
Yeah.
that's, yeah. What do you think, Valerie?
Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just
No, please.
here in the choir, call and response. Yeah, when I read this question, I also come across the word in the sutras, and I just want to say there are not two. There are not two. So your way of putting it, there isn't a thing. And in this practice, one experience that one can have in this tasting of non-duality, stripping away, is this is death. If there's anything that we call death, this is it. And Dogen over and over says that by this life, death. It's one thing, one not thing. Our language fails. But yeah, and as you just that, what could die when there's nothing that's born? This great liberation, this great freedom. How will you free yourself at the moment of your death? If you really know, if you really have seen, it's so beautiful. It's so intimate. And then, we could say, well, yeah, deathless. And I might, well, I won't say more. You could say deathless in the face of death.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably okay to suggest that, in finding that quality of awareness, I mean, I know some of these non-dual teachers are quite explicit. That hasn't been born and that doesn't die. And some will say out and out, that is God, that awareness. And fine, whatever they want to say. And they may well, who knows, maybe that's, I mean, but the thing with Zen and probably with Buddhism generally is it's a little more hesitant to make declarations, I think. It's more like, I mean, there's also this bizarre thing that I think is very challenging for some other deep schools of meditative contemplative practice, which is that even consciousness is empty. What does that mean? The Heart Sutra is so explicit about it. All the 5 components of experience are empty. All the 6 senses are empty. The mind is empty. And it means no mind. Comes right out and says it. No form, no sensation, no perception, no mental formations, no consciousness. And I don't think it's very easy to think about that. You have to experience it. There can be, a level of experience, and I don't think actually all Kensho necessarily goes all the way through like that, but there can be a Kensho where there just isn't even, well, I daren't say it, but let's just stay with isn't even anything. Should we leave it at that? What do you think, Valerie?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump to a further question which ties right into this. Isn't Kensho in our school also could just be a peep of seeing an experience that is not so deep as you describe? Are you perhaps describing Satori instead of Kensho?
Valerie, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely levels of depth of Kensho. They all have recognizable characteristics. So I mean, Kon Roshi and Kubota, others, it's like the analogy or simile is of a hole in the wall, or it's as if you're in a room of darkened glass. We are, this construct, the assumptions of a dualistic world of separation. And Kensho opens, as an opening. I mean, sitting itself, he says, and there's a sense where the dark glass gets more and more transparent, lighter, but this Kensho, which could be a glimpse, it's often called, you said, a peep, and even that is really a total reset. It's like there's that opening and you can see through. And then maybe through koan training, this ongoing practice, that this is the description, that opening can get larger and larger. Or what can also happen is that other, perhaps deeper experiences come and crack the glass, or can ultimately make the whole scene just collapse. So I'd be interested what you would say about Satori, Henry.
Yeah, I remember, I think in Zen, the Authentic Gate, Kohen Roshi talking about this a little bit. I think actually there's a lot of varied use. In some cases, Kensho and Satori are simply synonymous. In some, yeah, Satori can be used as a term meaning a deeper kind of Kensho, but actually, in some cases, in some traditions, some lineages, it's the opposite, that Kensho is the deeper thing. So we're talking about a realm of experiences that are, by their very nature, ineffable, inexpressible, and whatever words are used to sort of to salvage something from them, to be able to share somehow some flavor of what they are, they're only a cipher. It's like some of these old metaphors, like, no matter how much you say sweet, 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 nobody's going to know what sweet tastes like until they taste it. And I think we'd say, I don't know, Valerie, if you'd agree, but I think possibly, Sambo Zen has maintained some kind of sense of what certain characteristics that probably, if they're not there, it's not yet clear enough to work on the koans. I don't know, and it's rather important, this, because if you start off too soon on the koans, they'll turn into an intellectual exercise, which is tragic. And I think it probably happens. It probably does happen in our modern use of koans. It can happen, but it's really a shame, because they're conveying, they are. I think it's a really rare system for trying to share very, very, quite hard to find, and hard to maintain, and hard to sort of really sort of thoroughly get, levels of our humanity. I think it's a very precious thing.
Mm. I also just have such respect for people who have had what seemed to be a kensho and have started in on the koans, and in some cases gone quite far into them, quite far, and come to something that has made it clear. Maybe their own practice has become bare enough, undefended enough, and then they meet up with something in the koans that is so strong, and they realize, I've been thinking my way through this, and take themselves back to Mu. And I know several people who've done this, including some who are now, wonderful Zen masters. Fantastic. And I just, to be clear, to take the time to really encounter the koans, because it's so alive. And we do have this tendency to figure them, and there's a certain like I feel kind of relief and ease, in a sense, with that the Dharma can take care of itself. All this talking, and sometimes it's not very good talking, or one knows it could be better. And you just think, oh, I hope nobody got hurt. nobody's practice, I hope that wasn't impeding something. And then you realize, well, this Dharma can take care of itself. It can handle some weak teaching. And the koans can also handle some of our, sort of falling into them in this conceptual way. But we're cheating ourselves to go very far down that path. It's really missing, like, it's the menu instead of the feast, as you said.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Mark, how are we doing in terms of numbers of questions left?
So we have about 3 questions.
Okay, let's at least take one. Maybe we'd have to save 1 or 2 for tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's see how we go.
Could you say something about pride and the heart's relationship to it? Possibly also how this comes up in koans.
Valerie, would you like to?
Sure. I mean, I think pride falls into the category of one of these 3 poisons. It makes me think it's a defense against a sense of lack. And how it can come up in the koans, I'm not sure if the questioner means that a student can start to feel like, hey, I'm getting through these koans and start to feel some sense of gain or accomplishment, or I am doing well at this. Whenever that has happened to me, it's been so, it's just so fantastic how the tradition will just not let that stand. If it's just a sandcastle and a wave is coming. And I've mentioned this phrase before that I so love about this practice that I thought was the calligraphy in Sanun Zendo over the altar. I thought it was fearless humility. This humility is so integral. Again, things as they are, who you truly are. But this question also calls to mind how pride is also part of our ignorance, because if we could see who we truly are, it is so capacious, and so there's no merit, but the virtue of who you truly are. And the koans speak of that a lot, I'll remember like the last one in the Mumonkan, what is Bhagavats in 10 directions, and those are names for you, and you're so prosperous and you're so virtuous, and you're infinite, and you're compassionate, and that's who you really are. And this strange sort of fleck of pride that can get in the eye and prevent us from seeing that. So I do trust the training to polish that away. Yeah, no, it won't hold. What do you think, Henry?
Well, I don't dare add to that. I think that that was spot on. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I think it's true that, you know, pride comes before a fall, right?
Mm.
And, it'll knock you about. I remember once, way back, actually, I was chatting to a German student who was deep in Sambo Zen, very deep guy, and he, I can't remember what we were talking about, but he said, I think I was worried about having some pride actually in my practice or something like that. And he said, don't worry, sitting will make you humble. You just, you know, you just sit here. What are you doing that you could be proud of? You know, maybe you have a lovely experience or something, or maybe the teacher gives you a pat on the back, and then you're going to go and sit facing the wall again for hour after hour. Somehow it's going to be very uncomfortable if you want to carry on feeling proud. It's going to get more and more uncomfortable, and you're going to have to wrestle with that. And sooner or later, you're going to have to let it go because it just won't hold up. It becomes comfortable to the extent that we're letting go of ourselves. And you can't be proud. I mean, the moment if you let go of yourself and you feel great about it, it's not. You see, it's very sneaky. You know, and sneaks back in, and you don't feel so good anymore. Yeah. What do you think? My hunch is to leave it now. What do you think, Valerie?
I agree. And let's just be sure to pick up these questions. Mark, are you able to capture them?
Yeah, and I'll forward them to Dan for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, everyone. Wonderful questions. And thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for the questions as well. Very much.
So we'll take a break, maybe 2.5 minutes, and then we'll have a final sit and then closing remarks.